we are going to look at a writing task next. Now this activity is a little bit different. They've already been sorted. I'm going to give you 4 examples. One that represents a low, one that's close, one that's got it, and one that went beyond. So imagine now you've gone through this process, you've done the sorting. Your job now, I want you to look at these 4, see if you can decide which ones go in which pile and why you're putting them there. So again, you're looking at what do you see in the task. This task is a writing task. It was used in 3rd grade. You're going to do the same thing with this one that you did with the other one. You're first going to look at the task. Let me pull it up here. This was where students were doing opinion writing. The pre-assessment was writing about a favorite holiday. The Halloween example that I gave you is from that. This was the mid-assessment. So now they're given a short text to pull evidence from, and they have to decide if they were going to study sharks, which shark would they prefer to study, and what would be the reason. So the reasons come from the text that they were given. Okay? So I'm going to give you a copy of the task. Again, skim through what would you expect to see, and then you'll have 4 examples.
So number 4 has a lot of great detail about the hammerhead shark, and it has transition words, first, second, third, and it wraps up it. But it says in conclusion, this is why I would rather study the hammerhead than a whale shark. It has all this information about hammerhead sharks, but it doesn't have any mention of the whale shark. Mm-hmm. So, and one of the pieces of the assignment was to back up your opinion with evidence, both for and against.
Right. I love his diagram though up here. It's very well labeled and everything like that.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is he needs like a mini lesson in how do you go and make a comparison between the 2 different sharks. So that makes your piece stronger.
Because this is more like a report on a hammerhead shark than a comparison of the 2.
Exactly. And number 2 has the same problem. It doesn't have any comparison. It talks about the hammerhead shark again. It says, and he does have a conclusion, but doesn't mention the whale shark at all.
Right.
So how is that different? Because teachers sorted that one into a different pile than the one you just looked at. So neither of them really had the conclusion with a stated opinion.
Right.
But so why do you think people put that example 2, in a different pile than, what was the other one, example 4?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just talk about that.
Example 4 has many specific details about the hammerhead shark. And I think number 2 has very general details about the hammerhead shark, and not as many.
Yeah, it talks a lot in the beginning of how they are alone, but sometimes they can be in groups. During the day, they're in packs. At night, they're alone. So it's sort of just giving a little bit more detail about the same thing.
Kind of jumps all over the place, too.
There you go.
The transitions are not there.
Yeah.
Good.
They have first, second, and third, but they're not as coherent.
Nice. How about the other examples? That really is the difference between them. One, it's a lot choppier. Transitions don't really have meaning. Facts are kind of jumbled together.
Although when they say first, they're talking about groups and packs. The second, they're talking about food and how they get their food. The third, they talk about their eyes. It just doesn't. So in a sense, it is organized.
But it's disjointed, and there's no transition from going from the groups and packs to why are you transitioning to food. There's got to be some kind of transition.
And there's nothing about the whale shark.
Both examples are giving us 3 specific reasons for choosing their opinion. But this example has more sophisticated language. It's concise. This one has perhaps a greater volume of detail. We were looking at words like are too skittish.
That they're brave. They're curious.
Although interestingly, both of their second details, they are curious. They have the exact same.
Yeah, they do. And this one actually gives more details about they're curious and they will follow the diver's bubbles.
And this mentioned they get scared of humans' bubbles. Oh, but they're talking about hammerheads. I'm sorry.
Give an opinion.
So this is talking about what the whale shark does with the bubbles versus the hammerheads. This one definitely uses descriptive words. Yep. I think that's brave. I think that's one B.
Yeah.
But this is pretty sophisticated too. They will inspect divers to see what they are doing.
Plus, you can get close enough to study.
Very simple.
And they come out and say that, where this one you have to infer that. They are also shy, which is sort of wimpy, especially if someone wants to study them.
Versus
Where they come right out and say, plus you couldn't get close enough to study a hammerhead.
I would imagine a lot of the language, see them from low-flying aircraft. Things, examples like that are probably words from the texts that the kids read. That would have been good to have seen. So we could have seen who picked out more.
Especially words like unique.
Yeah,
They both use unique.
that's true.
So
yeah.
I think we could assume that must have come from the text.
Curious probably did too. They both use that same.
Which then doesn't make this one as sophisticated as we originally
Right.
thought,
Well,
if
that's my
those are
wondering,
the words that came directly from the text.
Yeah. I mean, skittish, it would be interesting to know if that came from the student schema or if that came from the article itself.
Yeah, and the opinion is, that hammerheads are chicken, the hammerheads are shy and wimpy, but that whale sharks are brave.
Yes.
So there's a counter. They're brave because of this. They're wimpy because of that.
Okay, let's just talk in general about these 4 examples. Again, writing is not necessarily easier than math. That's one conclusion we can come to. So we had these 4 examples. This is example 2. Actually, the student's name was Andrew. Just keep that in mind because I'm going to show you what the comments were about this paper in a minute. But this was Andrew, was number 2. And I think most people saw that was on the low end because what were some of the things you noticed in this piece? Andrew filled the paper. A lot of facts. But not supporting details. Good. Then there was this one, and this had, even the diagram is much more detailed than the first one that we just looked at. So there's a detailed diagram. Students did not have to do a detailed diagram, but they were told in the prompt they could go to a website to find more information. Many students went and got information and added that because they knew that the diagram should add information. That first one we saw had a drawing but no labels. It didn't add information. So that was another fine-tuned thing. It wasn't necessarily expected initially, but when we saw that most students did it, we tweaked the rubric. That was like, this is a mid-assessment. We want to teach them what to label so that it supports their writing. So some of them are starting to do that. So what were some comments about this one? This is actually Olivia's. And what did Olivia do? She's a pretty good writer.
I think she listed facts about the hammerhead.
Right.
Almost like a report.
Right.
And her last sentence is the first time really she mentions the whale shark.
In conclusions, this is why I would want to study. She almost ends with what her opinion is as opposed to starting with her opinion and then supporting it. She can pull the facts together, but she sort of misses the idea of what an opinion piece should look like. And if you look at the teacher's comments, Andrew was the first one, Olivia was the second one. And let's just look at what was typical of papers in that pile. Actually, in this class, there were only 2 students that fell below the got it line. And those were those 2 papers. But the comments were, for Andrew's, it's somewhat choppy. It jumps from one fact to another. Where Olivia's was more like a summary, giving some general reasons, but not necessarily stating an opinion and supporting it. So there's not a lot of elaboration. There is use of transition. So those were some typical things. So let's look at the other 2 examples just very quickly. This was Mackenzie's. And so what did you have to say about this? This is whale shark. I heard a lot of positive comments about this one. What would you describe in this piece of work?
It was very concise.
Concise, complete sentences, uses transitions, provides a supporting visual.
She states a fact, an opinion, and backs it up with facts.
Okay, opinions have something to back them up. And this was like the dividing line. If they got it, they had an opinion, they had a reason, and then some supporting evidence. So how is this one then different from Matt's paper? This was Matt's paper. Matt has a lot of those aspects, a diagram, an opinion. What did you see as the difference between these 2? It was very hard to sort these because they were close, and you had the same problem. But there were a couple of things that we noticed in some of the papers, but not all of them, that were in the got it pile. So what were you noticing? One thing a lot of people noticed right away is, in my opinion, I would rather a whale shark than a hammerhead. So what I heard was, well, they didn't say I would rather study it. So it's kind of like the counting error in the math task we looked at. It's a small thing, but do we think the student can probably write complete sentences through the rest of it? We wouldn't want to be that one word be the reason we say they didn't complete the task. They might be not scoring as high as they could. But what else in terms of differences? I think that's the only sentence where a word is missing.
There's multiple supporting details for each reason.
Multiple supporting details, maybe a little bit more elaboration. Do you see the student's voice coming out in this?
Hammerhead sharks are chicken?
Yeah, hammerhead sharks are chicken. They didn't get that from the text. So that's his own words. They get scared by the sound of divers' bubbles. Plus, you couldn't get close enough to study a hammerhead. So he's kind of connecting that to the counter to that.
I feel like Mac also did that, Mackenzie.
Okay.
They are also shy, which is sort of a wimpy.
Right, sort of wimpy. So again, a little bit of the voice.
Especially if someone wants to study them.
Right, right.
I think we struggled with how much of the previous one with the wimpy and all of curious, all those great words, how many of those came from the text, and how many were her own. So that's kind of where we were struggling with the differences.
And if you were in the classroom, you would have a better sense of it. They did talk about the text, which is a good strategy for a pre-writing, talk about the text. The texts were actually fact sheets. They weren't written in prose. So these are bulleted facts about each shark. We did that purposely. We didn't want it to overwhelm kids with reading, and we also wanted them to actually put those facts into sentences rather than copy sentences. So some of the words will be similar because they pulled the same facts, and some will maybe because they talked about that. But these were the other notes. This is, they both had general broad areas supported by facts, but some of them the teachers felt had just a little bit stronger rationale, and that's why they put Matt's over in the high end. There was a little bit more elaboration, a little bit more detail. They both had voice. And so it was a fine line between those two. The next steps for instruction here are probably going to be very similar. They're going to focus on better elaboration strategies, maybe a better hook, because when they talked about what would you do next, a compelling hook. You see very similar next step strategies. So even though they were sorted into two piles, the teaching probably would be the same for those groups, where it might be very different for those other students, needing to organize their information better to get variety of putting the pieces together. Did it feel like it was a process that was doable? Sort the work, talk about what you see in it?
Yeah, I could see how it would be much more beneficial to do it in a group rather than individually.
Okay, especially the first time you give a task, because you always are curious, do my students, like what did my students do? How does that compare with what your students did? Yeah, and having the conversation, that's that other purpose in the student work analysis, is just building your own understanding of some of the little nuances maybe you didn't expect. Okay, we're going to take a break.